Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And Jody Lynn, as you know, we have had lots of guests on the show over the years. You started off as a guest, actually, before you became a co-host.
I sure did.
In fact, I need to pass along a message to you. I had a message from a previous guest whom you know very well. Her name is Marilyn Penny. She wanted to say hello and how much she enjoyed working with you and with Heather. So hello from Marilyn.
Oh, I love that.
Interesting little side note. She told me in the email that she sent me today that Steve, we just celebrated the 11th anniversary of the show on September 26, 2023, and Marilyn wrote to tell me that congratulations, and by the way, that was her birthday. So synchronicities happening all over the place around here, which is very cool stuff. But, you know, Jody Lynn, with all the people we've had, I mean, we have lots of people who come on. They talk about, you know, the traumas that have gone on in their lives. You know, there's the crash and burns, and then there's the flight of the Phoenix, and the theme just plays out over and over again. I don't think we've had that many people on who've had to deal with a lifetime of trauma. No. That's an entirely different animal. But that's exactly what our guest today has had to deal with. And I think we're going to learn some really interesting stuff about not only how you deal with it, but how you come out the other side. His name is Steve Wilson. And around the age of 9 or 10, he was diagnosed as bipolar. And it has been a journey that he never expected. But he's going to tell us all about it here. So, Steve, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
Very good, thank you. Very good. That was wrong, what you said.
Oh, correct me. What needs to be corrected?
Okay, when I was 9 years old, I was sexually assaulted by a man who enticed me out of the line to get a Coke at a movie theater.
Wow.
Took me in the restroom and raped me.
Wow.
I was 9. That was 1958. I'm now 75, and at that time, there wasn't much known about the things I went through. There was no one to talk to. There was no one I could confide in. For some reason, and I hear this a lot, I blamed it all on myself. I looked like I was enticing him when I stood there. You know, all this stuff. So anyway, I decided not to tell anybody, and I didn't for 30 years. And I kept it inside me. And for about 3 months, I was back to normal again. Now, you got to understand one thing about bipolar. It is not a continuous line of being in the dumps. It goes like a roller coaster.
Right.
For 2 or 3 months, you'll be okay, living life okay. And then all of a sudden you'll crash and burn into a deep depression that could also last 3 or 4 months, a year, a day, whatever the cycle is. I endured my first depressive episode when I was in 4th grade. And it just came over me. I felt like I was worthless, like I had no friends, nobody loved me. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Terrible. That lasted for 4 or 5 months. My grades, which were stellar before that, felt like a rock. And then I lifted out of it again, and it didn't come back until 7th grade.
Wow.
So there was a couple years in between. And then it was real bad from, I would say 9th grade through right after I graduated from college.
Oh.
Now, I graduated from college in 1970. I started seeing a psychiatrist in 71 for the first time because my mother finally figured out that something was wrong with me. I was just like a lump of clay, terrible. No feeling, no nothing, express nothing, just down all the time. All I did was sit in front of the TV. In school, I didn't participate. It was horrible. And then in 1971, after I graduated from college, I got in a fight with my father. And immediately after that, I was put in a mental hospital for 3 weeks. For about a month or two before that incident, I had experienced deep suicidal ideations. I mean, deep. I was a swimmer and have been a swimmer all my life, and I would go to the pool and I'd dive in, and in every stroke, my mind from somewhere else would tell me to kill myself. So then I entered the hospital. I got some help during that stay that was able to lessen the suicidal ideations, but I was far from cured. When I got out of the hospital, they diagnosed me as clinically depressed. And so they tried all these medications, therapy, everything. Nothing worked. So they finally, 6 years later, said, well, they think they made a mistake. And I was really bipolar. Well, I never heard of bipolar. I didn't have a clue what it was. In fact, back then, I knew it as manic depression.
That was what it was used to be called, manic depression, and they changed it. Yeah.
Well, when I was diagnosed bipolar, they gave me lithium, which was a miracle drug back then, and it worked. It worked about halfway. It got me back so I could function again. And I went on, that was 1978. Most of what I had for the next 20 years was terrible ruminations. Things would get in my mind and couldn't get them out. They just drive me crazy. Night and day. I couldn't sleep. It was horrible. And I was impulsive and I couldn't make decisions. And I had several jobs that I either got fired from or I quit because I couldn't handle them. And the jobs would only last 6 months or so, and then they'd say, get out of here. So it was all because of the bipolar. If somebody said something to me, like he was the boss, and he said something, I would fly off the handle. Well, they'd get sick and tired of that, and just gave me the boot. Luckily, my family had for 50 years, they'd had a clothing store in Ohio. I had no other choice but to go there and work. That's how I supported myself and my wife and kids all these years. I hated it. It's the last place I wanted to work. No option. But it had an offshoot, and then I was able to have a family and had a great life away from work. Still had all the ruminations and all the things that went with it. One time, a new psychiatrist told me to change my pills and had me throw them out on the spot. And that set me back about 6 or 8 months. And I was having withdrawal symptoms at the time.
Wow.
And they were pretty severe, but they only lasted a couple of days, thank God. But they were bad. And I went on like that for up until 2000 when I got another psychiatrist, and he put me on a new drug called Paxil. And that eliminated the ruminations and helped me make decisions.
Wow.
I probably got 90% better with that pill.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's been going on.
Yeah, well, that's plenty. Like, do you need to have more? I mean, seriously.
No kidding.
But to have survived all of that, I mean, I almost hesitate to say this, but I keep hearing it from so many different people, so I'll dare to say it to you too. Did anything good come out of all this?
Did anything come out of it?
Anything good come out of it?
Yes, plenty. Two really good things, and the reason I wrote the book was because in about 2018, I was still having problems with some long-term experience I had that I kept still ruminating on those two or three all the time. So I went to a trauma therapist, and she had me go through my entire life, starting with my earliest memory.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did this over several month period, we both looked at the thing when we got done with it and said, Jesus, you've been through a lot. You ought to write a book about this.
Yeah, hey, there's an idea.
So I decided to anyway. But what I really learned from before I wrote the book was that there is no cure for bipolar, just like there's no cure for depression.
Mm-hmm.
But what I learned was I was able to have a good life in spite of all that because I followed the rules and did what I was told to do to get better. And I did things like if a pill wasn't working for me, I would tell the psychiatrist and we'd do something else.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I kind of figured, well, maybe everybody else can get some help and some kind of a life if they just do what I did.
Understandable. That's a very common theme. People go through challenging times. They find answers at the end, and they want to share them with the world, which is a laudable thing because you want to be able to help other people. By the way, the book that he wrote is called Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey by Steve Wilson. And that is available, of course, anywhere you can buy books. You told us what made you decide to write it, but what's the process like of writing that? Because you're basically telling your story, and you're telling the hardest parts of the story.
Well, my book goes my life through chronological order starting at age 8. It was not that difficult to write the book because I knew everything I was going to put in it. It was getting it in the right sequence and writing it in a way that it would be an easy read for everybody. The real problem is getting it published.
That's always a problem. Yeah.
That takes a lot of work, a year and a half or two to get done. And I was forced to go the self-publishing route, which costs a lot of money. And you have to kind of piecemeal everything out. And in my estimation, I'd never do it again. I'm thinking about writing another book, but I would never self-publish again. It just didn't work out, and I don't want to go through that again. But anyway, I had been a sports writer and the sports information director at Ohio Wesleyan University in Ohio right when I got out of college. So I was kind of used to writing. So that helped. But what really helped me decide to write the book was going back to about 1995. I would hire young ladies, usually young ladies in junior high or high school, to come into our store and wrap packages and run errands and things at Christmas time while we were too busy to do it ourselves. So this one year I hired this little girl. She was about 16. She had everything going for her. She was cute. She was a good athlete. I believe she played basketball. She was bubbly. She'd do anything for you. I thought, this kid's going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one Saturday morning, I went into work early, and there was her best friend waiting for me at the back door. She also worked for us.
Mm-hmm.
She was crying. And I asked her why, and she said, Angie killed herself last night. She took a gun with her to bed and shot herself in the head.
Wow.
And then right after that, I got a call from a good college buddy of mine, and he told me that his son of about 16 got real depressed and started robbing houses. Mm-hmm. And he finally got caught robbing a house. And his parents were called to come down and pick him up at the police station. They walked up to him. He said, Mom, Dad, I love you, but I can't take it anymore. Shot himself in the head.
Mm.
So I started looking into things like, how many people are really affected by mental illness in this country?
Oh, yeah.
20%.
Wow.
Lots of people. And then I started looking into how many children. 20%.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids.
Wow.
So then I started going to high schools in my area and speaking to them on teenage depression. And I would go to health classes and psychology classes. And at the end of each session, I would ask any kids who want to come up and talk to me to come up for a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of times nobody came up, but on this
Sure.
particular day, 2 girls came up, one at a time. First one was the top student in her class, a very good athlete, could do no wrong as far as everybody thought. And she came up to me and she says, Mr. Wilson, I don't know what to do. There's so damn much pressure on me to be the best at everything I do and to get in the best college, to excel at everything. I can't go on. My parents are driving me crazy.
Mm.
Sad story. And not much I could do about it, but just reassure her that there was help out there. Very next girl who came up said, Mr. Wilson, I have no friends. I want to die. My parents hate me. I'm going to run away. So that's what kind of started me really on the last 20 years or so, getting involved in trying to get the word out about mental illness and get rid of the stigma against it.
Because there is a stigma.
There's a hell of a stigma against it.
Mm.
The reason for that is people cannot see somebody inside of them when they're mentally ill. They see a guy, looks like he's sleeping in bed all day, or he's moping around and he looks terrible, and they go, well, what's wrong with you? And, try to explain it. And they go, oh, just go take a walk. You'll be all right. Well, that doesn't do any good except put you further down. That's what always happened to me. And so my wife and I and our kids moved, well, they were all grown, but they moved out here with us too. Moved out to Scottsdale, Arizona in 2008. And I wanted to continue speaking to high school classes. Well, they wouldn't let me because I was too old. Never heard anything like that, but they said it had to be here. It had to be somebody no older than 35. So I didn't want to stop. So I entered an ad in one of the local papers looking for a peer specialist for mental health support groups, and went through the training and got hired and began but facilitating 2 mental health groups here in Phoenix area, and have done it for the last 8 years. And it has really been eye-opening. I don't think anybody who hasn't done something like this can understand the extent of the problem in this country and almost all other countries. It's horrible. So that's what I've been doing.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
That's about the only word I can utter at this point. And Jody Lynn, you know, I'm usually not at a lack of words, but wow. I mean,
Yeah.
First thing I found out when I was doing, as I've been doing and progressing along in these support groups, is that a high number of people who are depressed or bipolar or borderline, maybe even schizophrenic, is because they were abused sexually, they were beaten, or they were beat down verbally by their parents, or they're bullied. The percentage is very high.
Yeah.
And in our groups, I let everybody speak in every session, and sooner or later, almost everybody who joins a group and stays for a while will take us through what happened to them. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Many of them, in fact, most of them had it a lot worse than I ever did. And their lives are ruined. And they may be 18, maybe 60 or 70. So, you got any questions for me yet?
Yeah, actually, I do have a few questions. And Jody Lynn, if you have any, feel free to jump in. But my first main question is, where is the hope here? And the reason I ask that question is, no matter how bad situations get, I've always found that there's ways to hope, there's ways to find a way out. But since I don't know this particular storyline well enough, I don't know where that path is. Do you have any ideas?
Yes, there's a couple. What I would call, the first two I'll talk about, could be very simple. One is insurance. The insurance companies in this country, and I've done podcasts all over, are about the same. They don't give much coverage.
Right.
And the coverage they do give, I had one person who said she had insurance. She gets $500 worth of coverage. Well, sessions are usually $200.
So it's about 2.5 sessions.
That's pretty good. The insurance companies, when I was out of college and married and getting my first life insurance policy, right under the beginning it said no coverage for mental health problems. That's the way it's been. Well, I don't think that holds true anymore, that part. But as far as insurance coverage, it holds true today. In fact, it's even worse. Now, if you've got a lot of money, or even you make, I don't know, 80, 100,000 at that level, 60,000, and can afford coverage, there's coverage out there with psychiatrists and psychologists. But if you fall in the crack of where you're only making $30,000, $40,000, you're in trouble as far as getting help.
Right.
And the government does nothing to even consider helping them. Oh, we've got clinics and we've got Social Security disability and all that. But the problem is you get put in a clinic that you can go to, and they're stretched so far because there's so many thousands of people who utilize them that you might be in stress, in real trouble. Now, real trouble means anything can happen. You can harm yourself, you can kill yourself, you can rob a store or whatever. Well, in many cases in these clinics, you go to a clinic that gets you in and you're there and you go through your first session and you ask when you can come back and they'll go, oh, a month or two. Well, if you're in stress and in dire straits, that month or two is like a lifetime.
Mm.
And then there's another thing. The therapists and psychiatrists in clinics don't last very long. So it takes 3 or 4 or 5 sessions to get used to and comfortable with your therapist. And then you come back the 6th time and they're gone. And you got to start the process all over again.
Yeah,
So
that's a challenge.
we don't fund, give the money. Let's compare it. Somebody has a heart attack, bam, they're there right now fixing them. Damn the cost, we'll figure out how to pay for it. Mental health it isn't that way. If you can afford it, you can get it. If you can't afford it, well, there's a little bit here for you, but good luck.
Yeah, and that's the key right there, because there's plenty of mental health help, but you have to be able to afford it.
Right.
That's the kicker right there.
And there's one other problem that's going on all around the world, is that because of the way the professionals are paid from insurance, it's so much a stranglehold that the insurance companies have on them that the professionals can't make a good living. So the number of therapists is dwindling. And I think I heard something or read something that in the next 10 years, we're going to be down 30,000
Wow.
professionals. So you got a lot of problems, and I will blame the insurance companies every time. Now, you asked me, I told you there was another thing, and that's the stigma against mental illness. And this goes into the government, to everyday life, all of it. People don't understand that mental illness is real. It can be devastating. It can affect all kinds of people around, even though they don't have the disease. And so people just kind of say, well, no big deal. And the government never does anything for them. They think, well, you don't have to worry about them. So those are the two really problem areas I think we have in this country.
I think it's hard when, like, to understand mental illness when you've never experienced it yourself, or haven't had, even if you've had somebody in your family actually that's gone through it, because it is on the inside. So it's like, hey, when I'm sad, I just go for a walk or I do this, I can pick myself up. But that's not the case. That's not what happens. My mom has bipolar and she's had it my entire life. Mm-hmm. And so it's not something that I've really, truly understood, and still don't understand the gravity of it because I'm not in her shoes. But understanding that there's a chemical imbalance in her brain, that her brain doesn't work like mine works, really helped me see that, okay, well, she could look fine. Like, she looks like she can do things. And I don't know if there's different types of bipolar, but she would go through a period of like work, like 24 hours, beast mode, like just on it, sharp, like doing all of these things. She'd work 24/7. And then she would go through this crash period where she would be like drinking a lot and just in the dumps, and become an alcoholic, and all of these things were tying into all of this. So it was quite a tumultuous upbringing, going through all of that, watching your mom do that. And it's really hard to understand or grasp, so especially at that age, like what is actually happening. But I was really grateful for my dad explaining things in a way that was simple, because even the doctors, they give you the 40,000 foot view of what's actually going on. And people can't comprehend that.
Well, I'll tell you, you asked how many kinds of bipolar there are. There are two. Bipolar 1 is depression, which follows into a high, terrible mania. Just like what you described with your mother working 24 hours a day. She thought she couldn't accomplish anything. She probably spent a lot of money, probably stayed up all night, all these things. And what they do is they have a tendency to ruin someone's life and the people around them. They get this big high, and it can last 6 months, it can last 2 months, and then they come crashing down and they go into the depths of a deep depression. And that basically is bipolar 1. Bipolar 2 is the opposite. Bipolar 2, you usually start out with a deeper depression. Now, when I use the word depression, I can go to you and say, are you going to ask me, what's it feel like to be depressed? Well, no matter what I say, you can't understand it. You have no idea what it's like to be at the bottom of the barrel, no way to look, but in many instances, to die. Or these kids especially harm themselves by cutting or burning. Do you know what that is? Well, they do this, and the reason they do it is to get a momentary relief from their mind. So, and then the bipolar 2 gets better, and the depression goes away, and they hit, or let's say I hit, hypomania, which is in between mania and normalcy. And you're not I wasn't as manic as other people get, but to give you an example of what I did one time, I took my wife 6 or 8 years ago to get a new car, and she picked out the car she wanted, and I looked over and saw another car sitting there, another kind. I said, I think I'll take that one too. So in both cases, we do stupid things. And if you were to ask me to really describe what it feels like to be really depressed, I would say take your worst day that you've ever had because you felt bad, I mean mentally bad, and multiply it by 100. You feel as though nothing is worthwhile in your life.
I want to ask a question, and part of me is saying, are you sure you want to ask this one, Walt? But it's a topic that comes up here all the time on the show, and I don't think I'd even be true to what we do here if I didn't bring it up. But I don't know what kind of answer I'm going to get here. Since so much of what you're talking about is involved with what's going on in your mind, and like you were describing, we can't see that. No one can see that. That's true
Right.
for everybody. Many times, many of the things we talk about here, we're often talking about, things you can do to improve your life, to, get what you want out of life, and so on and so forth. And probably the number one topic that goes along with that is the topic of mindset. So the question that comes to my mind is, does mindset play a role here? And if so, what is it?
Yes, it does, in the way that, all right, let's take a step back then, because to explain it, I've got to go to the medications. Medications can be a great thing for 50% of the people. For the other 50%, medications don't work, or they don't work nearly enough. So they've got to do other things. And also the people medication works for got to do other things too, but they're not in nearly as bad shape if they've got some medication working for them.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that can come into play to help you are, we talk about mindfulness a lot,
Mm-hmm.
which is training your thinking to shut out those horrible thoughts you have. And that goes into programs like EMDR, which is an eye movement thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go to dialectical behavioral therapy, and you can go to cognitive behavioral therapy. You can go to outpatient intensive therapy. All of these, there are others too. So they all have to do, and you can do meditation, things like that. They all have to do with controlling the mind, just like what you were asking. I've seen well over 1,000 people in the 8 years I've been doing this, and several people have done these things that I just described. Many of them have been helped a lot. There is no cure for bipolar or depression, so you've got to fight it your entire life. So when they get to do this, it doesn't mean you do it once. It make you feel better. You're doing better. And their courses, by the way, some of them go 5 days a week for 8 weeks or something like that.
Sure.
So the course ends, then you're out on your own. And then you may get back in the same problem again.
Mm-hmm.
With depression, bipolar, and the rest, more than likely that'll happen. So, go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish your statement.
So there are, most of these things are to condition your mind and get you to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say if you really give it a chance, they'll work. And if you put all this stuff together, the medication, the EMDR, all these therapies, and you do them as you need them, you can have a pretty good life. The problem is, one, if you're not going to a therapist, how are you going to know about these programs?
Mm-hmm.
You might look them up on the internet, but what do you really know? And two, there's the people who think, well, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just having a bad day. Well, that bad day goes into years.
Yeah.
And so they won't get any help. Then there are the people who go for medication and they take it for, whenever you go for medication, the therapist will always say, this is going to take a couple months for it to work. So don't get upset. Well, what a lot of people in my groups do and what a lot of other people do is they take the medication for a couple of weeks and it isn't working. It isn't supposed to yet. So they quit taking it.
Mm-hmm.
And they go right back in the dumpster. Then there's another group of people who take the medication, take it for 6 months, and it's working. Then they go, I don't need a medication anymore. I feel fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go back in the dumpster after that. And so what do? They don't repeat and try again. They give up. And that's how they have to live the rest of their lives.
Yeah,
that actually happened with that actually happened with my mom, and her doctor actually took her off of all of her medication, was like, you're good. You've been stable for a long time. Who's just a general practitioner. My dad's like, no, this is not the right call, sir. And he's like, no, she's good. It's all good. And it went wildly off the tracks.
Yeah.
Wildly bad. And to the point where the doctor eventually called my dad and was like, okay, we should probably, get the police involved and put her in the hospital. And that's what happened.
That's another problem with the way that mental patients who are in distress act unusually. And what do? They call the police, and the police come out. They knock them down, and they put them in handcuffs. And all that does is make things worse.
Mm-hmm.
I know a little bit about a program here in Arizona where they are using people who have been trained in calming down and getting these people who are really upset, getting them into a way rather than attacking them. And then they go along with the police. So there is some stride in that regard, because when you go and attack someone who's having a mental breakdown, someone could get shot, someone could get knocked over, a lot of things.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All of what you have been telling here, and I love the follow-up, Jody Lynn, that you told about your mom, all of it ties in with what I was going to say earlier when you stopped and said, what are you going to say? So this is all a good introduction to what I was going to lead into, which is one of the main ideas that has come out of so many discussions I've had with guests and co-hosts here on the show over the years, particularly those who have either a therapeutic or a coaching background or something along that line, is how long it takes for someone. Now, many of them are dealing with addictive behaviors, which is not quite the same thing, but there's some overlap. How long it takes for people with addictive behavior issues to change their neurological patterns. In fact, it came up in a conversation just the other day with my good friend Joel Elston. He's a former therapist and now a life coach in the Richmond, Virginia area. And he was talking about how it can take 90 days or more of continuously shifting patterns just to get the new pattern entrenched into the system. Mm-hmm. And that ties in directly to what you're talking about. If you have a program that's, 5 days a week for eight weeks, well, that's basically a 40-day program. So you're like halfway to your 90 days, not quite halfway to your 90 days. And then you leave the program and now you're on your own. And then people kind of, fall off the wagon, for a lack of a better term. So it strikes me that one of the most important pieces to this is trying to find ways to help people stick with these mindset altering, whether, it may be drug, patterns, it may be, meditations, it could be, the mindfulness, all the different methods that you can use to start shifting your patterns, and then finding a way to help them stay there, to stay on that for 90 days, 120 days, 150 days. So they really can ingrain it in as a new behavior pattern. And I can't say I have the answer on that. It just strikes me that's a direction where I see hope.
Yeah, it is a great direction. The roadblocks to get that to work are many. Thinking of the patient themselves, how they'll fight to not let everything end up successfully because of how hard it is.
Oh, sure.
I wanted to ask Jody, she's talking about her mother. Have you ever heard of an organization, NAMI?
Mm-mm.
Have you, Walt?
I don't know that one, no.
Okay, it's called the National Alliance of Mental Illness.
Okay.
And like my groups, which are support groups, they're throughout the United States. They may be in Canada, I don't know, but they're throughout the United States, every big city. And they hold group classes, which would have helped you when you first started encountering your mom acting that way. They teach classes on how to prepare family members, friends, anybody who is directly resulting from some person who's mentally ill. They teach them what to expect and how to react. Because one of the big problems is I needed support when I was going through it. When I was young, I had none. Mm-hmm. And it's the same stuff that goes on today. People just don't have help because the other people don't know what's going on, or they don't care, or they can't put up with them, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
There are classes that can help people understand.
Can you give us an idea of what are some of the strategies that someone who is dealing with a relative or a close friend, somebody they're close to, who does have a mental illness? What are some of the things that they can do to
The best
provide
thing
that
is
support?
to support them, not criticize them. You don't have to tell them, what to do. When I went through the training to be a group facilitator, first thing they taught me was always talk to the people in I statements, meaning if I were in your position, I would do this.
Mm-hmm.
Or I knew somebody who was suffering from this. He told me that he did this. You never direct it to say you should do this.
Yeah, don't make it an order.
You don't make it an order. So how many people know that? Nobody, unless you're going through it. Nobody has a clue. I mean, first thing you're going to say is, oh, come on, you can get over it. So I think the biggest thing that NAMI teaches, and I've never gone through the class, so I don't know. I'm not affiliated with NAMI. Ours is a separate.
Right.
First thing you got to do is show them positive support and realize that this is a lifelong journey and there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. And not only do you have to take care of the person who is suffering, but you got to take care of yourself too. Got to take a break every once in a while. No matter what's going to happen or what might happen, you've got to get away from it. You've got to have your own life. Otherwise, just like all caregivers, it'll eat you alive and you'll make things worse.
Sure. Yeah. Jody Lynn, this is actually probably kind of familiar to you. I mean, you're a coach, right? And you help people where financial issues are concerned, but you're still dealing with human beings who are, challenged with whatever's going on in their lives. One of the things that you do, I know, as a coach, is you kind of create space for them, a safe space where you're assuring them you're not there to criticize them. You're not there to judge them. You're there to just be helpful and supportive to them. And as I'm hearing what Steve's saying, I'm thinking that's something that maybe more and more people need to learn so they can provide some support to people that they know.
And I think going through this journey of life with my mom having this illness and all of the messed up things that happened throughout the journey has really taught me a lot of fundamentals that I utilize in my work today and just in my everyday life. One of them being compassion, having deep compassion for others and what they're going through, having that stick-to-itiveness, like it will get better. Understanding that it's not about you. Like that was a really hard one for me. Like when my mom was taken off the pills that one time that I mentioned, she had a manic episode and left and didn't want anything to do with us as kids. And I was in grade 7, I think grade 6 or grade 7. And she only wanted the dog. She said, nobody loves me except for Buddy, the dog. And I was really hurt. And I was so incredibly angry at that point in my life that she would go and she would leave. She left my dad a note telling him she was leaving him. And that's how we found out. And, everybody was distraught. And she went to various friends' house and racked up all her credit cards and went on this huge manic episode. And so when she was finally in the hospital and saying, nobody loves me except for the dog, I was so mad. And having to work through that anger myself obviously took a long time because I didn't understand. But it's something that I look back upon and I have compassion for her and I have compassion for myself and this realization that it had nothing to do with me. It wasn't that she didn't love me and like that she didn't mean to cut me with those words. It had nothing to do with me and everything to do with where she's at. And I think going back to something that you asked, where is the hope? The hope for me was in watching the entire situation unfold and watching the love and compassion that my dad had for her throughout all of this. I took that. What's that?
How is your mom now?
She's great. She's been on the same, I don't know if it's the same medication, but she's been on medication since that point. Like when she got better in the hospital and stuff, and eventually came home. She's been level. She kind of still teeters a little bit. You can tell when she kind of goes through, not anywhere near what she used to, but you can tell when she's feeling different ways. And I'm proud to say that I went from, hating her at points in my life because of all of these things to she's become one of my greatest friends.
You got to realize that your reaction is normal.
Yeah.
You're not a bad person because you're having these thoughts.
No.
You wouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. But she's taught me a lot and understanding she had her own trauma and went through that and just having that compassion for her. Now we have a relationship because I worked really hard to forgive her for all of those things and forgive myself for all of those things that were normal and expected and whatever for a young teenage kid to feel, but still felt like crap feeling them towards your parent, and learned to see her in a completely different light. One, she might not be perfect, but none of us are perfect. And seeing the beauty that comes with her and how big her heart is and all of the good things that she brings to the table in spite of all of these crappy hands she's been dealt in her life.
Understood. Completely understood. I'm glad she's doing well. See, and that can happen with anybody.
Yeah.
Suffering from these, if they would just take the bull by the horns and run with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And get support, apparently, because as you were describing, Jody Lynn, your father was very supportive to her, and that Steve, that's exactly what you were saying people needed, and her mom got that. That apparently has helped.
Yeah.
Well, I had my parents didn't help much. Now, I got to give them credit for one thing, or a reason for one thing. They were products of the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Sure.
And it's a lot different than what it is today.
Yeah, the mindset of that era.
I had 3 daughters were my support thing, and my friends. They never criticized me. They never kept me away from them, from doing things with them. They understood. So that helped a bunch. And I've been married for 51 years. So she had to have an impact on me.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, she definitely had, and apparently your daughters did as well. So, I mean, that's, once again, that's providing evidence that shows when there is support for the person who's afflicted, that person can get it together, can find a way through and create maybe not your typical normal life, but a life that is normal for them. Right. And that other people can feel good about them and they can feel good about themselves.
Well, if this disorder was one that was continuous all day, every day, you'd never even make it through the first year. You give up. But luckily, it comes and goes and you have a chance to experience some good times.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Are you able to carry those good times when you're dealing with the downtime, or is it like when you're dealing with the downtime, do the good times help, or is there just like this wall that prevents you from even going there?
Well, I don't have many downtimes.
Oh, good.
And it sounds like your mother doesn't either, Jody.
That's right.
And that's for me because of the medication and my family and friends. But occasionally I'll have a bad day where I want to stay in bed all day and do nothing. Just have to get through it. That's all you can do.
When you're in that space, are you able to mentally connect into the times when you're feeling good, or is that just too far away?
I would say that when I'm in that space, I can't do much of anything.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not having thoughts of how terrible everything is and how to kill myself and how to do these things. I'm not having any of those thoughts.
Okay.
It's just a feeling of, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to stay in bed, or I'm going to sit in a chair and listen to a book.
Right. Right. Yeah, I get that. It makes sense too. I mean, we talk about that just with people who don't have issues like that. Everybody has a challenge going from a very low state to a very high state in one step. You just can't do it. I mean, we usually talk about taking incremental steps. So it makes total sense to me that it would be even worse when you're dealing with a condition like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. This is really something. This has been quite the conversation. I have to say, every once in a while, there are episodes that we do where, I mean, every episode I'm always aiming for that subtitle, Your Daily Dose of Happy. And there are some of them that come along like this one where I'm thinking, okay, I know we can get there. How are we going to get there? What's going to be the route? I think we actually found it. I think, yes. Jody Lynn, you pretty much got us going when you were talking about compassion. Compassion you learned for your mom, and how it shifted your own mindset and how you not only felt about yourself, but how you felt about your relationship with her. That's about the time where I felt like we were going on the upswing, where we were going to that happier, that better feeling space, which just goes to prove no matter what you're dealing with, there is a route out, but boy, sometimes it can be hard to find.
Yeah. For sure.
And when you do find it, and when you do find it, there's victory in that. There's something to celebrate when you do find it. That's what I find in your story, Stephen, and in the story that you've been sharing with us. Even in the most darkest of those stories, there's always a way to be found. There are lots of obstacles in the way. There are lots of frustrations in the way. There are lots of what ifs. Wouldn't it be great if this was happening, but it's not happening? Wouldn't it be great if that's happening, but it's not happening? And yet, even with all those, there still are ways to get to where we need to go. That's my takeaway from your story today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but on the other side, suicides around the world are skyrocketing. Mm. People are not able to find the way out. And I just had a friend of mine about 5 years ago who was probably 60 years old. And he made a fantastic living, made a lot of money, gave a lot of money to his church, and looked like he was the happiest guy in the world. His wife walked down the stairs and had him himself. Mm-hmm. So you can never know what's going on in somebody's mind.
Yeah, that's another important takeaway.
If a guy comes up and he's got a broken leg, you can see it.
It's obvious, right? Right, but you can't see what's going on inside somebody's head, especially since there is so much social pressure to not show that. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest part where the stigma is concerned with mental illness. You know, we're not allowed to show that we're feeling bad. We're not allowed to show that we're feeling whatever it is that we're feeling. And I see changes happening. Like there are definite shifts going on in society, but for many people, not nearly fast enough.
Yeah, and then you look at the media. And in certain political spheres in this country, if there's a shooting and a killing, who did it? Someone with a mental illness.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We'll hear that over and over and over again. So they decide that every one of us is capable of doing something like that.
Which is not true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, two things. First of all, I want to reiterate the book. Your book is Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey. I said earlier that's available everywhere. I presume it actually is available everywhere. I presume
it Amazon. Is not.
It's not? Okay. So so then clarify for us. Where do you get the book?
You can get it in Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
You can get it on an ebook, an audio book, or a paperback. As I said, one of the bad things about self-publishing is very difficult to get it into local bookstores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's limited, but we do what we can do to get it out.
Well, good news with both Amazon and Barnes & Noble, that's going to be available for most people. So that's a fairly easy way to find it.
I want to tell everybody it's only 120 pages long, and it isn't some book that you got to spend hours reading. You can read it in 2 or 3 hours. You can listen to it in a couple, and it's really a good read. Good.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you for that. One other thing I always like to make it a point to do here, and this certainly applies to you too. I get the impression that the way you tell your story is by going to other podcasts like this one and telling your story to as many people as you can tell it to, yes. Which is, totally laudable. You are amongst many people who come onto this show, come onto other shows, who have found a way through on your own situation and want to help other people find ways through with their situations. That's what I call a giver. You're a giver. You're somebody who wants to give to somebody else. And one thing that doesn't often happen with givers is that while givers are constantly giving, they don't often know all the different people that they're reaching. There are a lot of people you'll never meet, you'll never see, who are hearing you on this podcast and other podcasts and so forth. And we kind of tend to overlook that. I think that needs to shift. So I make it a point to say on behalf of those people that you've never met and that you've never seen, that you never will meet, that you never will see, you never will meet, thank you for what you've been doing, because you're making a difference in this world, even if you don't actually see the result.
Of course, people all along say the same thing. Well, if you help one person, it's been worth it. And that is true. And I have no idea how many people bought the book. I have no idea how many people have heard me, but I'm sure I've reached some people somewhere along the way. And I'm going to keep doing it. I've got another podcast tomorrow and a couple next week. And so get the word out there some way.
Good job. Well done. Well, thank you, Steve Wilson. Thank you for joining us and sharing your story. Really, really, really good stuff. And
if you ever want to just get in touch.
All right. And Jody Lane, I always go to you to summary. Now, this is probably one of the most difficult summaries, but maybe it isn't because of your mom's story. So, what's your number one takeaway today?
To what?
There's a few. There's a few takeaways that I've got. Number one, you're never too old to inspire. I think it's so inspiring, Steve, that you're 75 years young and you're committed, even though you see all of these tragedies and these horrible things that people are going through, and that it's more and more every single day. You keep putting yourself out there and you continue to hold space and have hope for those that need it. And I think it's also a reminder of compassion. You have no idea what someone is going through. They could be the bubbliest person you've ever met and happy-go-lucky or whatever, but be really hurting inside. And as a society, as humanity, we need to have more compassion for those around us and for those that are listening. I hope that it's a message of you're not alone. There's a lot of people that struggle with these things, and a lot of people who've been impacted through personal or, through their family or watching someone else that they know going through it, but you're never alone. And all it takes is to reach out. And that would be how I'd wrap up today.
Well, I will tell you, almost everybody who comes into my groups, the first day they'll go, oh, it's so good to know I'm not alone. I was the only one suffering.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not alone, especially when they come into the group. Now they know they're not alone. Now they finally have that support network they've been looking for.
Oh, so, I want to say another thing about the groups.
Yeah.
Find them anywhere. Call NAMI. Go online. There are groups everywhere. You don't have to try to come to mine because most groups can only handle about 15 people at a time.
Right.
Look for them on the internet in your city and you're there.
In fact, in the description of the show, I'll include a link to the National Alliance of Mental Illness website so that there's an easy source for people to find exactly what they're looking for if they're looking for a group like that. Mm-hmm. So thank you once again, Steve. We appreciate your time and effort and energy and all that you're doing. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.